Nobody talks back to powerful men in this city. Nobody. Elena's hand was still shaking when she said it. She had just stepped between a screaming city councilman and a deaf elderly woman sitting alone at table 7, and every single person in that restaurant had stopped breathing at the same moment. Forks frozen mid-air. Glasses half raised. 50 people, not one of them moving. Because the woman Elena was defending was Lucia Moretti. And the man rising slowly from his chair across the room, eyes locked on Elena like she was the only thing in the world that existed, was Vincent Moretti. Chicago's most feared man, and he had never looked at anyone the way he was looking at her right now. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment below, telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let us begin. Elena Rossi had spent 3 years learning how to disappear inside a crowded room. It was not a skill she was born with. It was something she had built quietly and carefully, the way you build a wall one brick at a time when the world keeps throwing things at you. She had gotten very good at it. Good enough that most nights she could move through the dining room of Bella Vita without a single customer actually registering her face. They saw the apron, they saw the notepad, they said what they wanted, and went back to their conversations. Elena wrote it down, smiled, and walked away. That was the job. That was the version of living she had settled into. Bella Vita was one of those restaurants that made you feel the weight of money before you even sat down. It was the kind of place where the tablecloths cost more than Elena made in a week, where the wine list was a leather-bound document, and the pasta was described in terms no regular person used. The lighting was always low and amber and warm, and the music was always soft enough that you could not quite make out the melody which Elena always thought was intentional. Everything about Bella Vita was designed to make you feel like you had arrived somewhere important without quite being able to explain why. Elena had arrived there 3 years ago with a fake last name, a fabricated work history, and exactly one skill she never put on any resume. She needed money. She needed a place that paid cash tips. And she needed somewhere nobody would ask too many questions. Bella Vita, it turned out, had very strict rules about one thing above all others. Table 7. Every new server learned about Table 7 within their first 48 hours. The head server, a sharp-faced woman named Carla, who wore her hair pulled back like she was always bracing for impact, delivered the instructions the same way every time. Flat voice. No room for questions. Table 7 belongs to Vincent Moretti, Carla said on Elena's second day, not looking up from the seating chart she was adjusting. When he comes in, you do not approach unless he signals. You do not linger. You do not make eye contact unless he initiates. You bring what is ordered, you confirm it is correct, and you leave. That is it. Elena had nodded. And if something goes wrong, Carla continued, finally looking up, you do not try to fix it yourself. You come to me immediately. Understood. Understood. Good. Carla set the chart down. He tips well. Do not ruin it. Elena had accepted that information the same way she accepted most information in her current life. She filed it away. She did not ask why. She had long ago stopped being curious about dangerous men and the rules that surrounded them. She had seen enough of that particular world to understand that the rules existed for a reason, and the reason was almost always the same. Because consequences in that world were permanent. So Elena stayed invisible. She kept her head down. She worked her tables, learned which regulars wanted extra bread without asking which ones needed more time with the menu, which ones came in alone, and just needed to feel like someone noticed them. She was good at reading people. She had always been good at that, even when she wished she were not. The weeks passed, the months passed, 3 years passed, and then on a Thursday evening in October, everything changed. Not because of anything loud, not because of anything dramatic. It started with a napkin. Vincent Moretti came in that evening the way he always did. No announcement, no spectacle. The door opened and he walked in, and the room just knew. It was the kind of knowing that ran below words, the way animals know a storm is coming before the sky changes. People did not stop talking, but they became slightly more aware of their own volume. They shifted fractionally in their chairs. The energy of the room reorganized itself around his presence without anyone acknowledging that it had done so. He was not what most people expected when they imagined a man with his reputation. He was tall, yes, and his shoulders were the kind that suggested a history of physical consequence. But he dressed with a quietness that surprised people. Dark suit, open collar, no jewelry except a single silver watch on his left wrist that he never checked but also never took off. His face was the face of someone who had learned to control what it showed, which meant most of the time it showed nothing. Controlled, contained, something moving very slowly behind still water. That evening he was not alone. Elena noticed the woman immediately, not because she was remarkable in any obvious way, but because she was clearly fragile in a way that had nothing to do with age. She was maybe late 60s, slight and elegant, with silver hair arranged carefully, and hands that moved in her lap even when the rest of her was still. She wore a dark blue dress that looked like it had been chosen with great care for this specific occasion. She looked at the room around her, the way someone looks at a place they have been told is safe, but have not yet decided to believe. Elena recognized that look. She had seen it in her own mirror. She watched Carla approach table 7 with her professional composure locked firmly in place, and then watched with a kind of quiet attention as the situation revealed itself. Vincent said something to Carla. Carla nodded, but there was a tightening around her eyes that Elena recognized as uncertainty she was not allowed to show. He was explaining something. Carla was listening very carefully, and the woman in the blue dress was watching the tablecloth with the politely removed attention of someone who knew they were being discussed. Then Carla walked back toward the service station, and her face had lost about 10 years of certainty in 30 seconds. She pulled 2 of the servers aside. Elena heard fragments from across the room. His mother. She's deaf. He wants... I don't know how to... Does anyone hear? The answer apparently was no. No one at Bella Vita knew American Sign Language, or Italian Sign Language, or any sign language at all. And Vincent Moretti's mother was sitting at table 7 with her beautiful, careful posture and her restless hands, and the entire staff of one of Chicago's finest restaurants was quietly unraveling because none of them had a way to speak to her. Elena set down the water pitcher she was carrying. She had not made a decision. She would think about that later. In the moment, it did not feel like a decision. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, because there was a woman sitting alone at a table who did not know how to ask for what she needed, and Elena knew exactly how that felt, and there was something inside her that simply could not walk past it. She crossed the dining room. She passed Carla, who noticed her moving toward table 7, and opened her mouth. Elena met her eyes for 1 second and kept walking. Carla closed her mouth. Elena reached table 7. She did not look at Vincent. Not yet. She turned her attention entirely to the woman in the blue dress, and she waited until the woman looked up, and when their eyes met, Elena raised her hands. She signed slowly and clearly in Italian Sign Language. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Elena. Is there anything I can bring you right now? Tea, perhaps?" The effect was instantaneous. The woman's entire body changed. It was not a subtle shift. It was the physical expression of a door opening somewhere deep inside her, a rush of warmth and recognition, and something that looked almost like relief, so profound it had crossed into pain. Her eyes went wide. Her hands came up from her lap, and she signed back quickly, the movements rushing out of her, the way words rush out of someone who has been holding them too long. "You sign. You actually sign. Oh, you sign properly. You know the real signs, not just the basic ones people do when they feel sorry for you. You actually know." She stopped herself. She pressed one hand briefly to her chest. She started again, more slowly. Smiling now, a real smile, not the polite, careful expression she had been wearing. "My name is Lucia. Thank you. That is the first real thing anyone has said to me all evening." Elena smiled back. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Lucia. What would you like tonight?" She was aware peripherally that Vincent Moretti had gone completely still. She was aware that the table nearest to them had stopped pretending not to watch. She was aware that Carla was standing 6 feet away with the expression of someone who has just witnessed something they do not have a category for. But her attention was on Lucia. Entirely on Lucia. Because Lucia was signing with the particular intensity of someone who has been silent for a very long time and has suddenly been given permission to speak, and Elena was not going to break that for anything. They talked about tea. They talked about whether Lucia preferred her bread warm or at room temperature. They talked briefly and with genuine warmth about the particular challenge of navigating a restaurant when you cannot hear the ambient sounds that most people use to orient themselves in a space. Lucia's signs were precise and expressive and occasionally very funny, and Elena laughed once genuinely without meaning to. That was the moment Vincent spoke. "How do you know ISL?" His voice was low. It was the kind of voice that expected to be the loudest thing in a room, even when it was quiet. Elena turned to face him for the first time, and she met his eyes, and she kept her expression professional. "My younger brother was deaf," she said. "We learned together when he was young." Vincent studied her the way people study things they cannot immediately categorize. It was not aggressive. It was simply thorough in a way that most people did not achieve. "Your Italian is good," he said. "Your sign, ISL, is specific." "My family is Italian-American," Elena said. "It made sense to learn the Italian variant." He looked at her for one more second. Then he looked away back at his mother, and something in his face shifted in a direction Elena could not name. "Thank you," he said. And it was clear from the way he said it that those two words cost him something. Elena nodded and went to get Lucia's tea. Carla intercepted her at the service station, grabbing her elbow just hard enough to be a communication rather than an obstacle. "Where did that come from?" Carla demanded, keeping her voice low. "Where did what come from?" "The sign language. The whole—" Carla gestured vaguely toward table 7 with one hand. "You never said anything." "Nobody asked," Elena said. Carla stared at her. Then she released her elbow. "Well, keep doing whatever that is, and for the love of God do not mess it up." Elena spent the rest of that evening moving between her other tables and periodically returning to check on Lucia, who each time received her with the particular warmth of someone who has found something they were not expecting and is afraid it might vanish. They signed quietly about small things. The weather. Whether the bread at Bella Vita was truly as good as the restaurant believed it was. Lucia's opinion on this was specific and delivered with great dignity, and Elena agreed with her on every point. Twice during the evening she was aware of Vincent watching. She did not address it. She had learned a long time ago that the most effective response to being watched by dangerous men was to give them nothing interesting to watch. She moved. She did her job. She was present for Lucia and professional for the room and invisible to him. But she was aware of it. They stayed until nearly 11. When they finally rose to leave, Lucia turned to Elena at the door and signed with great deliberateness, "I will come back, if that is all right." Elena signed back, "I hope you do." And then they were gone, and the room seemed slightly larger without them in it, and Elena went back to clearing her tables with her heart beating slightly faster than usual for a reason she was not going to examine. Over the following weeks, Lucia came back, not every visit with Vincent. Sometimes she came with another man older with the careful movements of a longtime bodyguard who had decided discretion was the better part of survival. Sometimes she came with a younger woman Elena never got introduced to. But every time the first thing Lucia did when she walked into Bella Vita was look for Elena, and every time Elena came to her. What happened between them in those visits was not dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was the quiet kind of thing that looks unremarkable from the outside and is completely transformative from the inside. They talked about books. Lucia had opinions about Italian literature that she had apparently been storing up for years, with no one to share them with. She talked about her garden. She talked about the particular loneliness of attending family gatherings, where everyone was very careful to be kind to her, while simultaneously talking around and past and through her as though her deafness had removed her from the conversation entirely. "You know what it feels like," She signed one evening reading Elena's face with the attention of someone practiced at finding what language does not say. The being invisible. Elena hesitated. Then she signed back carefully. Yes. Lucia looked at her for a long moment. But you chose yours. It was not a judgment. It was just a statement. And it landed in Elena's chest with the particular precision of something that was exactly true. She did not respond to it. She changed the subject. Lucia let her. But that evening, walking to the train after her shift, Elena stopped on the corner for 30 seconds and just breathed the cold October air and reminded herself of all the reasons she needed to keep the wall exactly where it was. There were good reasons. There were very good reasons. She recited them the way she always did. The reasons still held. She kept walking. It was on the 4th week of Lucia's visits that Vincent started staying, not always with his mother. Sometimes she came first and he arrived 40 minutes later and took a separate table close enough to observe but far enough to create the fiction of independence. Other times they arrived together and he stayed after she left, drinking the same black coffee he always ordered, and apparently looking at his phone while actually Elena became increasingly certain watching the room in that particular way that men with his kind of life learn to watch rooms. She caught him looking at her twice. Both times he looked away first. On a Wednesday, he did something unprecedented. He flagged her down. Elena arrived at his table with the professional composure she had refined over 3 years of keeping herself behind glass, and she said, "Can I get you anything else?" "Mr. Moretti?" "Sit down," he said. She looked at the chair across from him. She looked at him. The restaurant was still active around them, conversations and soft music, and the sound of good wine being poured with care. "I'm working," she said. "I know you're working." He said it with the patience of someone who expected resistance and had already decided how to wait it out. "This will take 5 minutes. Sit down." Elena sat. Vincent looked at her the way he had looked at her that first evening. That thorough categorizing look that was somehow neither threatening nor comfortable. "My mother talks about you," he said, constantly. Elena said nothing. "She doesn't do that," he said. "She doesn't attach to people. Not anymore. Not since—" He stopped. He reset. "She's been isolated for a long time. She's careful about who she lets in. She seems to me like someone who has a great deal to say and not enough people willing to listen," Elena said. Something moved in his face, quick and unguarded there and gone before she could name it. "That's accurate," he said. "Then, why sign language?" "You said your brother. What happened to him?" The question landed differently than most personal questions because it was asked with the directness of someone who did not dress things up and had decided this was worth knowing. Elena held his gaze. "He died when I was 19. Car accident. He was 15. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the kind of silence that contained something. "I'm sorry," Vincent said. "Thank you." He looked at his coffee. He said, "She hasn't laughed in 2 years. Not really. Not until she started coming here." Elena felt something move in her chest that she firmly pushed back into place. She said, "She's funny. People should tell her that more." Vincent looked up. "You think I don't tell her?" "I think," Elena said carefully, "that it is very hard to be the person who is trying to protect someone and also be the person who can just sit with them. Those are 2 different jobs, and they require 2 different parts of yourself." The look on his face was something she could not read and did not try to. She pushed her chair back. "I should get back to my tables." "Elena." He said her name for the first time, and it had the particular weight of someone who has decided something. She stopped. "What are you hiding from?" he asked. The question hit her like cold water. She managed somehow to keep her face arranged in something professional, and still. But every muscle in her back tightened at once, and she was absolutely certain in the way that the body is certain, before the mind has caught up, that this man was not asking casually. "Everyone hides something, Mr. Moretti," she said. And she walked away. She did not look back. In the break room afterward, she stood at the small window that looked out over the alley and pressed her palm flat against the cold glass and told herself this was fine. This was manageable. He was a client. His mother was a kind, lonely woman who deserved better than she had been given, and Elena was glad to give her the small thing of being truly spoken to. That was all this was. That was all this could be. She had spent 3 years building something stable, something small and safe and survivable. She was not going to let herself forget why. She pulled out her phone. No messages. She put it back. She thought about the way Lucia's face had looked that first night when Elena raised her hands and signed, "Good evening." And she thought about her brother Marco, 15 years old, and laughing at something from the back seat of the car. And she thought about the year after that, when she had signed to empty air because there was no one left to sign to. She went back to work. The night was almost over when she came out of the kitchen carrying a dessert order and nearly walked directly into Vincent, who was standing near the service door in a way that suggested he had positioned himself there deliberately and then chosen to wait. She stopped. He did not move. "I shouldn't have asked you that," he said. It was out of line. Elena studied him. The apology was real. She could tell because it had the texture of something uncomfortable, not the smoothness of something practiced. "It was a little out of line," she agreed. "My mother wants to know if you would ever come to Sunday dinner." Everything in Elena's body went quiet and still. "She asked me to ask you," he continued. "She said, and I am quoting directly, that she has waited long enough to have a real conversation at a dinner table, and she is not getting any younger." Despite herself, despite every solid, careful reason she had constructed over the last 3 years, Elena felt one corner of her mouth lift. "That sounds like her," she said. "It does." He was watching her with that same thorough attention. "She also said you would say no." "She's probably right, but she asked me to tell you that no is just a word, and words can change." Elena looked at him. She looked at the dessert plate in her hands growing cold. She looked back at him. "I'll think about it," she said. She walked past him to deliver the dessert. Her hands, she noticed, were not entirely steady, and in the chair by the window where she had been sitting for the past hour watching the room with her silver hair bright under the low lights, Lucia Moretti looked across the dining room at Elena and smiled. A slow, knowing, entirely unburdened smile that belonged to someone who has seen something confirmed and is deeply privately pleased about it. Elena looked away first, but she was smiling too, just barely, just enough, and somewhere beneath the quiet, careful surface of a life built for survival, rather than living something that had been very still for a very long time, was beginning almost imperceptibly to move. She did not go to Sunday dinner. She told herself it was the right call for 4 days straight, and by the 5th day, she had almost convinced herself it was true. What she could not explain was why she had memorized the address, not because anyone gave it to her, she had not asked. But Lucia, on her next visit to Bellavita, had pressed a small folded card into Elena's palm at the end of the evening, with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had decided something and was simply executing it. Elena had carried the card in her jacket pocket for 3 days without opening it. On the 4th day she opened it. On the 5th day, she told herself she was not going. She went. She stood outside the brownstone on a Sunday afternoon in November with her hands in her coat pockets and gave herself exactly 30 seconds to turn around. The street was quiet. The neighborhood was the kind of quiet that money purchases deliberately. She counted to 30. Then she walked up the front steps and knocked. Lucia opened the door before the knock had fully landed, which meant she had been watching from the front window, which meant she had expected Elena to come, even when Elena had not yet decided. She was wearing a dark green dress, and an expression of such complete satisfaction that Elena laughed in spite of herself. "You knew I'd come," Elena signed. "I knew you wanted to," Lucia signed back. That was enough. Inside the house smelled like garlic and rosemary, and something baking that Elena could not immediately identify. Lucia took her coat without ceremony and hung it on a rack near the door, and then signed with great enthusiasm that dinner was almost ready, and Elena should come into the kitchen because there was something critical she needed to taste immediately. Vincent was in the kitchen. He was standing at the stove in a dark gray shirt, with the sleeves pushed up, stirring something with the focused attention of a man who takes this specific task seriously. He looked up when Elena walked in and said, "You came." "You sound surprised," Elena said. "My mother said you would. I wasn't sure." He turned back to the stove. "She's usually right." Lucia had already moved to the counter and was signing rapidly at Elena about the bread, which she maintained was the centerpiece of any proper Italian Sunday meal, and which the bakery had gotten wrong this week. Slightly too dense, she had opinions. Elena responded to all of this, and managed simultaneously to be aware of every movement Vincent made at the stove, and to be absolutely certain she was not showing that awareness. The dinner table seated 10. That evening it held 3. What Elena had expected was tension. What she found instead was something more disorienting, which was ease. Not the forced ease of people trying very hard to seem relaxed, but actual ease, the kind that comes from a space where certain pretenses have been quietly removed. Lucia signed across the table with the energy of someone finally let out of a room she had been locked in too long, and Elena signed back, and Vincent watched both of them with an expression Elena gradually identified as something she had never seen on his face before: peace. It sat on him strangely like a coat he was not used to wearing, but it was real. He spoke mostly to Elena, translating occasionally when his Italian sign was not quick enough to keep up with his mother's pace, and the three of them built a conversation that moved across topics with the natural rhythm of people who have more to say to each other than they expected. Lucia wanted to know about Elena's past. She asked with the directness of someone who had decided she was owed this information and was simply collecting it. "Where did you grow up?" "New York," Elena said, then signed it simultaneously for Lucia. "Family." A beat. "My mother, my brother, not much else." Lucia watched her hands. "Your father." Vincent said quietly, "Mama." Lucia looked at him, then looked back at Elena and signed, "You don't have to answer that." "He left," Elena said, "when I was 14. It was complicated. It was not the whole truth. But it was not exactly a lie either, and Elena had gotten very good at finding the narrow space between those two things." Lucia studied her for a long moment. Then she signed, "Complicated is a word people use when the truth is heavy." Elena looked at her hands around her wineglass. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." The moment hung there not uncomfortably but with the weight of something real. Vincent changed the subject. He asked Elena about music of all things, and she almost lost her careful composure entirely because she had not expected that, had not prepared for it. And for one unguarded second, her face must have shown something, because Vincent stilled slightly, the way people still when they have accidentally touched something live. "You play," he said. It was not a question. "I used to," Elena said. "What instrument?" "Piano." She picked up her wineglass. "A long time ago." "How long ago?" "Long enough that it doesn't matter." He looked at her with that thorough attention again. "Things that made us who we are don't stop mattering because we stopped doing them." Elena met his eyes across the table. "Is that something you believe or something you tell yourself?" The question came out sharper than she intended. She felt Lucia watching them both with the alert interest of someone who recognizes the specific frequency of two people discovering each other's edges. Vincent did not look away. "Both," he said. They finished dinner. Lucia insisted on coffee. Vincent made it with the same focused seriousness he had brought to the stove, and Elena sat at the kitchen counter, while Lucia showed her photographs on her phone with the enthusiasm of a woman who has been saving these up for an occasion. Her garden. A trip to the coast of Sicily years ago. A photograph of a much younger Vincent, maybe 17, standing in front of a car with his arms crossed, and an expression that was trying very hard to be intimidating and succeeding approximately 40%. Elena pointed at the photograph and looked at Lucia with raised eyebrows. Lucia signed, delighted. He thought he was very serious. I can see that. Elena signed. He still thinks he is very serious. He is. Elena signed. But he also made very good pasta. From the other side of the kitchen, Vincent said without looking up from the coffee, I can see both of your hands, you know. Lucia and Elena looked at each other. Then Lucia covered her mouth with one hand and shook with entirely undignified laughter, and Elena felt something crack open in her chest at the sound of it. Quiet and real, and she thought about what Vincent had said on his first evening. She hadn't laughed in 2 years. Not really. She looked at Vincent. He was watching his mother laugh, and his face, unguarded for exactly as long as he forgot to guard it, held something so raw and so private that Elena looked away immediately because it was not hers to see. She walked home that night in the cold, with her hands in her pockets, and spent the entire train ride arguing herself out of the feeling that had taken up residence somewhere behind her sternum. She lost the argument. She went back the following Sunday, and the one after that. By the 4th Sunday, Carla had noticed. Carla noticed everything eventually, which was partly what made her good at her job, and partly what made her exhausting to work with. She said nothing directly because Carla was too strategic for direct. But the looks she gave Elena across the dining room on Moretti evenings had shifted from cautious approval to something more complicated, and one afternoon in the back hallway, she stopped Elena with one hand on the doorframe. Be careful, Carla said. With what? Elena asked. You know with what? Elena looked at her. I'm being professional. You're being kind, Carla said, and made it sound like a liability. Kind is fine with most people. With that family kind is complicated. Elena stepped past her. I'll keep that in mind. She did not keep it in mind. Or rather, she kept it in mind the way you keep a warning in mind about ice on a road you have already decided to drive. Aware of it, factoring it in, but moving forward anyway, because the destination has become somehow more important than the route. The thing was, it was not Vincent. She kept waiting for it to be about Vincent, because that was the story she had been telling herself to stay careful. Powerful man. Complicated world. All the reasons why not. She could recite them. She had been reciting them. But the pull she felt toward those Sunday dinners was not primarily about Vincent, and the honesty she was slowly, reluctantly developing about her own feelings required her to admit that. It was about Lucia. It was about what happened when she sat across from that woman and used her hands and watched Lucia's face open the way it opened, the way a person opens when they are being genuinely fully heard. It was about the fact that Elena had been invisible for 3 years by deliberate design. And with Lucia, something in her was visible in a way that felt not dangerous, but necessary. Like a plant growing toward a light source, it did not choose, but cannot ignore. She understood this was not safe. She understood it anyway. It was on a rainy Wednesday evening, a full 6 weeks after that first Sunday dinner, that she made the mistake of letting her guard down at Bella Vita. Vincent came in alone. No Lucia. No bodyguard. Just him, which was unusual enough that Elena noticed it before she noticed anything else. He sat at table 7 and ordered coffee and did not look at his phone, which meant he was thinking about something, and Elena left him alone for 20 minutes because that was what he seemed to need. When she came to refill his cup, he said without preamble, "My mother told me about your brother." Elena's hand went still on the coffee pot. "Marco," he said. "She said you told her about the accident, how old you were." 19, Elena said. "I was 21 when I lost my father," Vincent said. He did not look up from the cup. "Not an accident." The weight of those 3 words was enormous, and he delivered them with the specific control of someone who has carried them for a very long time. Elena set the coffee pot on the table and sat down across from him, which was the second time she had done this, and the second time it happened without a decision being made, just a recognition of a moment that required presence rather than professionalism. "Did you know it was coming?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "No, both." He turned the cup slowly on its saucer. You know it's possible in your world. You know what that possibility looks like. But knowing it's possible is not the same as being ready for it. No, Elena said. It isn't. They were quiet for a moment. Around them, the restaurant moved in its soft amber world, completely indifferent to what was happening at table 7. She talks about you like you're already family, Vincent said. Elena heard the word and felt it land in 2 different directions simultaneously. She's easy to love, Elena said carefully. Yes. He looked at her, then directly. Why are you hiding Elena? The second time he had asked this question. The same directness. No softening. I told you, she said. Everyone hides something. You told me a line, he said. I'm asking you a real question. Her heart was doing something that she refused to acknowledge. She kept her face still. You don't know me well enough to know the difference. I know you better than you think, he said. You learn sign language from grief and keep it private for years. You work in a restaurant that's beneath your education. You flinch when anyone in a uniform walks in. You never take the same route home twice. He paused. I noticed things. The air between them had changed quality entirely. It was very quiet. It was the quiet of something that cannot be undone, once said. You've been watching me, Elena said. Not a question. I've been paying attention, he said. There's a difference. There might not be. There is. He picked up his coffee. I'm not asking because I want something from you. I'm asking because my mother has decided she loves you, and I need to understand why someone with your specific kind of fear has decided to step into our world. Elena said, I haven't stepped into anything. You've had dinner at my house 4 Sundays in a row. Your mother invited me. My mother invites people she trusts. He set the cup down. She doesn't trust easily. Neither do I. So when both of us end up feeling something in the same direction, I pay attention. The room was beginning to fill for the evening service. Elena could hear Carla's voice, somewhere behind her, managing the hostess station, with her usual precision. She should stand up. She should go back to work. She should say something professional and neutral and go. She said, My name isn't Rossi. She did not plan to say it. It came out of a place beneath planning the place where truth lives when it's tired of being contained. Vincent looked at her. He did not react the way she expected. He did not stiffen, or reach for a phone, or shift into whatever operational mode a man with his life presumably had for moments of unexpected revelation. He just looked at her steadily. Okay, he said. My real name is Elena Caruso, she said, and felt the name in her mouth like something she had swallowed years ago and was only now coughing back up. I changed it when I came to Chicago. Why? She looked at him. She measured the distance between what she could say and what she could not. My father owed people. A lot of people. When he disappeared, some of those people decided the debt transferred. Vincent's expression did not change, but the quality of his attention shifted in a way she felt rather than saw. How long ago? He asked. 4 years. And you've been running since. Hiding? She corrected. There's a difference. Something in his eyes. Recognition. He said there might not be, and he used her own words back at her so precisely that she almost smiled despite everything, despite the fear that had taken up permanent residence in the space between her shoulder blades since the moment she said her real name out loud for the first time in 4 years. I shouldn't have told you that, she said. Why did you? She thought about it. Really thought about it. Because your mother said something to me a few weeks ago. She said I chose my invisibility, and she was right. And I have been tired of the choice for a very long time. And I suppose something about saying it out loud to someone who would understand. She stopped. Who would understand? Vincent finished quietly. The eye contact between them was the kind that cost something. You should know, he said after a moment, that no one with your name, real or otherwise, is going to have anyone coming after them in this city. Not while... He stopped. He started again. Not while my mother considers you family." Elena looked at him for a long time. The offer underneath those careful words was enormous, and she understood exactly what it was, and she understood exactly what accepting it would mean. And she said, "I don't want your protection, Vincent." "I know you don't," he said. "I'm offering it anyway. There's a difference." She stood up. She picked up the coffee pot. She said, "I'll think about it." Walking back to the service station, she was aware that her hands were not entirely steady. She was aware that she had just told a man she had known for 6 weeks a truth she had not told another living soul in 4 years. She was aware that something fundamental had shifted in the architecture of the life she had built, and that she had been the one to shift it, and that the shift felt terrifyingly, inexplicably like relief. She was also aware of Carla standing at the service station with the expression of someone who has observed something she did not expect and is rapidly reorganizing her assessment of the situation. "Don't," Elena said. "I didn't say anything," Carla said. "You were about to." Carla looked at her for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "Just be careful, Elena. Please." Elena met her eyes. In Carla's face, beneath the strategic exterior and the professional composure, was something real, concern, genuine and unperformed. "I'm trying," Elena said, and meant it. She got through the rest of her shift. She was professional. She was capable. She delivered food and refilled glasses and managed her tables with the same quiet efficiency that had kept her employed and unremarkable for 3 years. But the whole time in the back of her mind, something was turning over and over like a stone in water. She had said her name, her real name. And the world had not ended. The walls had not come down. The thing she had been afraid of for 4 years had not materialized in the shape she expected. What had happened instead was that Vincent Moretti had looked at her and said, "Okay," and in that single syllable had somehow managed to hold more safety than anything Elena had built with her own hands since the night she left New York with one bag and a borrowed identity and a grief so large she could barely see around it. She stepped onto the train platform in the cold and stood there for a moment in the wind and thought about Marco, about his laugh, which was too big for his face, which she had always loved, about the sign he used for her name, not the standard sign, a private one they had made up together when he was 6, and she was 10, a small, swooping gesture at the heart that meant Elena and also meant sister. And also, she had always suspected, meant you are the person I trust most in the world. She had not used that sign since the night of the accident. She raised her hand in the empty cold air of the train platform and made the sign. Just once, privately. The way you light a candle for someone who cannot see it, but you light it anyway, because the act of lighting it is the point. Then she put her hand back in her pocket and got on the train. She did not see the black car that pulled away from the curb across the street. She did not see the man inside it who was on the phone speaking quietly with a photograph open on the screen in front of him. A photograph of Elena Caruso, taken that evening through the restaurant window with a long lens. A name she had not used in 4 years had just been spoken out loud. And in this city and the world, she had stepped closer to, without intending to spoken words, had a way of traveling to exactly the wrong ears. She did not sleep well that night or the night after. It was not guilt exactly. It was something more specific than guilt. The particular alertness that comes when you have done something irreversible and your body has not yet caught up to the decision your mouth made. She had said her name, her real name, to a man she had known 6 weeks, to a man whose world was built on exactly the kind of dangerous knowledge she had spent 4 years making sure no one possessed about her. And what frightened her most lying awake in her small apartment at 2 in the morning, with the radiator knocking its familiar rhythm, was that she could not honestly say she regretted it. That frightened her more than anything. She went back to Bella Vita the next day, and worked her shift, and said nothing to anyone about anything. Carla watched her with that careful sideways attention she had developed, and Elena ignored it with the same practiced ease she applied to most things she could not afford to think about. Lucia came in on Thursday without Vincent. She sat at table 7 and signed before Elena had even set down the water. "He told me you told him." Elena went very still. How much did he tell you? Your name? What you are hiding from? Lucia's expression was not alarmed. It was the expression of someone who had already processed this information and arrived at a conclusion. He tells me things he does not tell anyone else. That is how I know he trusts you. Why would that mean he trusts me? Because he only tells me things about people he is trying to protect, Lucia signed. He wanted me to know in case I noticed anything, in case someone came around asking questions. Elena felt the cold move through her that had nothing to do with temperature. Has anyone... Lucia looked at her with steady eyes. Not yet. The words carried weight they were not supposed to carry in a restaurant at 6 in the evening. Elena pulled out the notepad she kept in her apron pocket and held it in front of her like a prop, something to do with her hands. You should not be involved in this, Elena said. I am already involved, Lucia signed back simply. You made me involved the moment you spoke to me. The moment you treated me like a person instead of a problem to manage. She paused. Then, I have lived a long time inside my son's world. I know what danger looks like. What you are carrying is old danger, the kind that moves slowly and is therefore more frightening. Elena said, I shouldn't have come to dinner. Yes, you should have. Lucia signed it with finality. Stop saying things you do not mean. Elena looked at this woman, this sharp, warm, irrepressible woman, and felt something in her chest tighten with a kind of love she had not anticipated and could not entirely afford. She went to get Lucia her tea. For 3 more days, nothing happened. On the 4th day, a man Elena had never seen before came into Bella Vita for lunch and sat at a table in Elena's section and ordered the soup and never once looked at the soup. He looked at Elena. Not in the way customers looked at servers, the looking through, the looking past. He looked at her directly, and when she brought the soup and asked if he needed anything else, he smiled with the specific smile of someone who already has what he came for. He tipped 30% and left. Elena stood at the service station afterward and breathed carefully through her nose and told herself it was nothing. She called no one. There was no one to call. That was the architecture of a life lived the way she had lived it. Invisible means alone, and she had chosen invisible, and this was the cost. She texted Vincent's number, which she had programmed into her phone 2 weeks ago under the name LM for Lucia Moretti. As a fiction she permitted herself. The message said only, Someone came in today. Lunch. He watched me the whole time. The response came in 4 minutes. Description. She described him. Mid-50s gray at the temples, the kind of unremarkable features that suggested they had been deliberately kept unremarkable. Brown jacket, no tie. Vincent's response. Don't take your usual route home tonight. Take the red line to Fullerton. Marco will be there. Elena stared at the name in the message. Then she texted back. Who is Marco? My cousin. He'll have a green scarf. Don't talk to him. Just follow. She pocketed the phone and went back to work, and did not think about the fact that Vincent had just deployed a cousin named Marco to escort her safely home, and that the name Marco was the name of her dead brother, and that the universe had a very particular sense of irony she had no patience for in this moment. She took the red line. She followed the man with the green scarf. She got home without incident. She sat on her kitchen floor for 20 minutes because sometimes the body needs to be close to the ground to remember what solid feels like. The following week was the week of the councilman. It was a Friday evening in December, the restaurant full, the kind of crowd that generates heat and noise and the particular social electricity of people celebrating the end of a work week. Vincent and Lucia had arrived at 7. Vincent unusually quiet Lucia in a particularly bright mood that expressed itself in rapid-fire signing the moment Elena appeared at the table. Elena had been moving between tables when she heard the voice. Not heard exactly, felt, the way you feel a wrong note in familiar music before your brain has caught up to identifying it. The city councilman's name was Gerald Marsh, and he was loud in the particular way of men who have never once been told to lower their voice by anyone who mattered to them. He was at a table 2 over from table 7, with 3 other men who all laughed at appropriate intervals, which meant they worked for him or wanted something from him or both. Elena did not know who he was, she learned later. In the moment, she simply registered drunk loud, the kind of loud that was pushing in a direction. She was signing something to Lucia about whether the bread this week had improved from last week's assessment when she heard it clearly for the first time. "That's the Moretti woman," Marsh said not quietly to the man across from him. "The deaf one. You know she doesn't even know what's being said around her, just sits there." Elena's hands paused mid-sign. Lucia did not react because Lucia had not heard. Lucia would never hear. That was the entire point and somehow the entire horror of this moment. How does a mafia queen not even hear herself talk? Marsh laughed at his own joke. The men with him laughed too, one beat late. Elena looked at Lucia's face. Lucia was watching Elena's hands, waiting for the rest of the sign, still completely unaware. And in that moment, Elena understood with absolute clarity that the mercy of deafness in this specific situation was also its cruelty. Lucia did not know, which meant Elena was the only person at that table who carried the weight of what had just been said. She could let it go. She understood that this was the rational choice. She was a waitress. Marsh was a city councilman. The restaurant was full. Vincent was 8 feet away. The rational choice was to finish the sign, bring the bread, and walk back to the service station. Her hands were shaking when she set down the notepad. She crossed the 2 feet to stand beside Lucia's chair, and she leaned down slightly and signed, clearly looking directly at Lucia. "Don't listen to cruel people. Your voice matters more than anything in this room." Lucia blinked. She read Elena's hands, and then read her face, and understood immediately that something had happened she was not aware of. Her expression asked the question without words. Then Elena straightened and turned around and faced Marsh directly, and the room, or at least the portion of the room within range of this moment, went very quiet. "Sir," Elena said, and her voice was steady in a way that surprised her. "I'd ask you to speak about other guests with more respect." Marsh looked at her with the particular blink of someone who has not been challenged in a very long time, and whose first response is therefore confusion rather than anger. Then the confusion cleared, and the anger arrived. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know who I am?" "I know you're a guest in this restaurant," Elena said. "And so is she. And she deserves the same dignity as anyone else at any table in here." "She's deaf," Marsh said, as though this explained something. "Yes," Elena said. "She is. She's also someone's mother and someone's friend, and she has been coming to this restaurant longer than most of the staff, and none of that changes, because she experiences the world differently than you do." The table nearest to them had gone completely silent. Beyond it, the silence was spreading, the way silence spreads when people realize something real is happening in a room full of performance. Marsh pushed back his chair and stood up, which was a mistake he made, because standing made him feel like he was escalating effectively, when in fact, it made him more visible to everyone in the room, including Vincent Moretti, who was already on his feet. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Marsh said. He reached out and grabbed Elena's arm. Not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to assert. And then Vincent was there. He had crossed the distance from table 7 in absolute silence, and was standing 3 feet away, and the temperature of everything in his immediate vicinity had dropped by approximately 10 degrees. He did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly. He simply stood there, and the weight of his presence reorganized the room around it, the way gravity reorganizes everything in its vicinity without asking permission. Marsh looked at him. The color that had been rising in Marsh's face over the past 60 seconds began very gradually to reverse direction. The hand on Elena's arm dropped. Vincent looked at Elena first. 1 second, making sure. Then he looked at Marsh with the expression of a man who has already decided how this ends and is simply allowing the other person to arrive at the same conclusion at their own pace. "Take your hand off her," Vincent said. Quietly. The quietness was the point. "Now listen," Marsh started. "That was not a complex sentence," Vincent said. "Take your hand off her." The hand was already off her, had been off her for several seconds. But Marsh said, "I wasn't. I didn't." She was being Gerald. Vincent said the name the way you say a name, when the name itself is meant to be a reminder of what the person knows about you and what you know about them. "Sit down." Marsh sat down. The room, which had been holding its collective breath, did not quite exhale because the scene was not quite over. Vincent turned to his mother. He knelt beside her chair, which was something Elena would later think about many times. The image of this man feared in this city in ways that most people preferred not to examine too closely, lowering himself to his knees beside an elderly deaf woman in a restaurant full of people. He raised his hands and signed slowly and clearly so that she could see every word. "You don't deserve shame. Not ever. Not for 1 second. Do you understand me?" Lucia looked at her son. Her eyes filled. She reached out and touched his face with one hand, the particular gesture of a mother who is seeing something in her child she has been waiting to see for a very long time. Then Vincent stood and turned to Elena and said quietly enough that only she could hear, "Neither do you." Elena looked at him and felt something she had spent years building begin in that moment to come apart at the seams, not collapse, not break. Come apart the way a structure comes apart when the conditions that required it no longer exist. The way you do not need a coat once you have come inside. She said, "Thank you," and her voice was not entirely steady. "Thank you," he said back, and meant something different by it. The dining room restarted itself around them the way a machine restarts after a power interruption. Conversations resumed. Glasses were lifted. The ambient sound of Bella Vita reasserted itself over what had happened the way water closes over a stone. But the stone had landed. By the next morning, it was on social media. Not the full story. A fragment. A video someone had taken on their phone poorly framed the audio inconsistent but enough. Enough to see the councilman's table. Enough to see Elena standing her ground. Enough to hear the phrase, "You don't deserve shame," spoken by a man everyone in Chicago recognized, kneeling beside a woman no one had ever seen in public before. Elena saw it when she woke up. She sat in her kitchen with coffee going cold on the counter and watched it cycle through 3 different local news accounts in 20 minutes and felt the cold understanding that her carefully constructed invisibility had just been comprehensively destroyed. Her phone buzzed. Vincent. "I know," she typed before he could say anything. "I saw it." "Come to the house," he typed back. "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't fine. Come to the house." She went to the house. Lucia met her at the door again, but this time the expression on her face was not satisfaction. It was something more complicated, and it told Elena immediately that whatever was being handled inside this house was not simple. In the front room, Vincent was standing with 2 other men Elena had never met. One of them was on a phone. The other was looking at a laptop with the focused attention of someone managing information flow. Both of them looked up when Elena walked in and looked at her with the specific assessment of people deciding how much of a problem she was. Vincent said to the men, "Give us a minute." They left. Elena watched them go. "What's happening?" she asked. "The video went to 3 stations by 6 this morning," Vincent said. "Someone is feeding it deliberately. This is not organic." Elena looked at him. Marsh doesn't move that fast. Marsh is embarrassed and quiet when he's embarrassed. This is someone using Marsh as an entry point." He paused. "Someone who had already been watching you and needed a moment to attach a story to." The cold was back in Elena's chest. "The man in the restaurant," she said. "Thursday lunch. His name is Detective Carl Pruitt," Vincent said. "He's been on retainer to a syndicate operating out of the South Side for 11 years. He finds people. Specifically, he finds people who owe money or information to people who want money or information." Elena sat down on the nearest chair because her legs had made that decision for her. "He found me," she said. "He found Elena Caruso," Vincent said. "He's had the name for roughly a week. The video gave him a face to put to it publicly." "My father's debt," Elena said. "They think I know where he is. Do you?" She looked up. "No, I have not spoken to my father since I was 20. Since the night he left and took whatever he knew and left us to answer for it." Her voice was flat and entirely honest. "I don't know where he is. I don't know what he took. All I know is that men showed up at my mother's door in New York 3 weeks after he disappeared, and I knew what that meant, and I left the same night." Vincent was looking at her with an expression she could not fully read, but underneath it was something that made her think of the sign Lucia used when she wanted to say, "I understand," in the deepest possible sense. "You were 20 years old," he said. "Yes. And you have been handling this alone for 4 years." "I didn't have another option." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You do now." The weight of that sentence was not small. "Vincent," she said, "I know what you're going to say. I don't want to be a problem you solve." "You're not a problem," he said. "You're a person my mother loves. That means you're my responsibility whether you want to be or not." He paused. "Also," he said, and something shifted in his voice to a register she had not heard before, quieter and more careful. "You are someone I would like to know for a very long time. That means something to me regardless of the circumstances." Elena looked at him for a long moment. In the other room, she could hear the murmur of the 2 men on their phones, managing whatever needed to be managed. In the kitchen, she could hear Lucia making coffee with the deliberate, practiced sounds of a woman who is pretending not to be listening. "This is going to get complicated," Elena said. "It's already complicated," Vincent said. "Complicated is just where we are. What I'm asking is whether we're in it together or separately." She thought about Marco, about her mother in New York, who she had not called in 4 years because calling was a risk she could not take. About 4 years of train routes changed, and names kept secret, and conversations kept shallow by necessity. She thought about Lucia's face the first night Elena signed "Good evening," the way something had opened in a woman who had been closed for years. She thought about what it felt like to be truly seen by someone for the first time in longer than she could remember, and how terrifying and necessary it was simultaneously. She said, "Together." It was the most frightening word she had said in years. Vincent nodded. No performance. No triumph. Just a nod, real and solid. The kind of agreement that means something has been decided at a level deeper than words. From the kitchen came the sound of Lucia setting 3 cups on the counter, and then her voice, which was not a voice, but the sharp, deliberate knock she used when she wanted attention. And when they both looked at her, she signed with one hand. Not even both the single-handed sign of someone who considers this matter settled. "Coffee, both of you, now." Elena looked at Vincent. Vincent looked at Elena. And despite everything, despite Pruitt and the video and the name that had traveled further than it should have, and the 4 years of fear that was not finished yet, she smiled. A real one. The kind she had almost forgotten how to make. She got up and went to have coffee with Lucia Moretti. She did not see Pruitt's second call that morning placed from a parking lot 3 blocks away to a number she would have recognized if she heard it. A voice she had buried with her childhood. A voice that said, "You found her where?" And then, after a pause in a tone that was not relief, but calculation, "Don't approach. Not yet. I need to get there first." Her father was in Chicago, and he had been here for 2 weeks. She found out about her father the same way she found out about most things that mattered in her life. Too late, and all at once. Vincent told her that afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table while Lucia was in the other room, and the coffee was still warm, and the morning had not yet fully transformed into what it was about to become. He did not soften it. That was one of the things she had come to understand about him in these weeks. He did not dress bad news in good clothes. He said it plainly. "Pruitt's call this morning went to a prepaid number we traced to a man who checked into a hotel on the near north side 11 days ago under the name Robert Kane." Elena looked at him. "That's not his name." "No," Vincent said. "It isn't. His name is Anthony Caruso, and according to everything we can establish, he has been in this city for at least 2 weeks." The kitchen was very quiet. "He knew I was here," Elena said. "It appears so. Before Pruitt, before the video." She worked through it, and the working through it felt like pressing on a bruise to confirm it was real. He was already here. He found me on his own, and then he called Pruitt in. That's what it looks like. Why? Her voice came out flat and strange. If he found me and he wanted to reach me, why bring in Pruitt? Why not just... She stopped. Something cold and clear moved through her. Because he doesn't want to reach me. He wants to use me. He's making a deal. He's trading my location to the people he owes, and I'm the payment. Vincent said nothing, because she was right, and they both knew it. Elena stood up from the table. She walked to the window over the kitchen sink and stood there with her back to the room and pressed both palms flat on the counter and breathed through the specific kind of pain that has no clean name because it is not grief exactly and not anger exactly, but the compound form of both that happens when someone you once loved demonstrates finally and completely that they are not who you needed them to be. She had known this about her father for a long time. She had known it on some level since she was 14, and watching him move through their apartment at odd hours with the agitation of a man managing things he could not speak about. She had known it since the night he left, and took the money, and took the information, and left her mother and Marco and 18-year-old Elena to absorb the impact of his choices. She had known it. But knowing a thing and having it confirmed are different weights. "How long do I have?" she asked without turning around. "Before Pruitt moves a day. Maybe 2. He'll want to verify the location, establish a clean approach." Vincent paused. "But Elena, you're not running." She turned around. "I'm not..." "No," he said. "You're not. Because running is what he's counting on. Running is what isolates you and makes you manageable." He stood up. "You stay here. We deal with this together." That was the agreement. The agreement was made before I knew my father sold my location to people who have been looking for me for 4 years. The agreement was made knowing that whatever came, we handled it together. He said it without heat, which made it more effective than heat would have been. That hasn't changed. From the doorway, Lucia appeared. She had been listening, Elena realized, not to the words, but to the texture of the room, to the particular quality of silence that tells a person something serious is happening. She looked at Elena's face and read it with the precision she applied to all communication, her entire attention focused and real. She signed. "What happened?" Elena looked at her. She thought about lying and discarded it. Lucia had a gift for identifying the shape of the truth even when the specific content was withheld. She signed back. "My father is in this city. He told someone where to find me." Lucia did not flinch. She absorbed this the way she absorbed most difficult information, with the still serious face of someone who has seen enough of the world to understand that people are capable of most things. Then she signed, "Come sit down." "Lucia." "Come sit down." She signed again, and the repetition was not impatience. It was insistence. The particular insistence of someone who has decided that what is needed in this moment is presence, not strategy. Elena sat. Lucia sat across from her and took both of Elena's hands in hers and held them the way you hold something fragile that you want to make sure understands it is not going to be dropped. She signed slowly. "When Vincent was 21, his father was killed by men who had been trusted, men who were supposed to protect us. I sat in a room very much like this one, and I felt what you are feeling right now. The particular pain of betrayal by someone who should have chosen differently." Elena looked at her. "It does not stop hurting." Lucia signed. "I will not tell you it does, but it changes. The pain changes shape when you stop carrying it alone." She squeezed Elena's hands once. "You are not alone anymore. Do you understand me?" Elena's eyes were burning. She blinked it back with the discipline of someone who has been not crying for 4 years through practice and necessity. "Yes," she signed. "Good," Lucia signed. "Now, what do we do?" The three of them spent the next hour at that table and built something that felt less like a plan and more like a reckoning, a clear-eyed accounting of what existed and what needed to happen. Vincent made calls. Elena listened. Lucia sat at the table and followed what she could follow, and asked precise questions when she could not, and nobody treated her like a problem to be managed around. By noon, Vincent had confirmed Pruitt's hotel. By 1 in the afternoon, he had 2 men outside the building where Anthony Caruso was staying. By 2, he had a conversation scheduled. "I want to talk to him," Elena said. Vincent looked at her. "No. He's my father." "That's exactly why you shouldn't talk to him," Vincent said. "He knows how to use that. He's been using it your whole life, whether you recognized it as use or not." Elena sat with that for a moment. She recognized the accuracy of it and hated it. "I need him to know I know," she said. "I need him to understand that this ends, not just the running, all of it. Whatever arrangement he thinks he's made, whatever he thinks happens when Pruitt delivers my location to those people, I need him to understand it does not happen." "Why?" "Because otherwise he will try this again," she said. "With someone else. With my mother." She held Vincent's eyes. "My mother is still in New York. She changed her name too. But if he's already found me, he can find her." The kitchen went very quiet. Vincent said, "Where is your mother?" Elena told him. The address she had memorized and never written down and never spoken aloud. She said it quietly and felt the specific release of giving someone else a weight you have carried alone so long you forgot it was separate from you. Vincent typed it into his phone. He looked at her. "She'll have people watching her building by tonight." "People she won't see," Elena said. It was not a question. "People she won't see," he confirmed. She exhaled. The kind of exhale that comes after breath held so long you forgot you were holding it. The call with Pruitt happened at 3. Elena was not in the room for it. She sat in the hallway outside the closed door with Lucia beside her and tried to read the quality of Vincent's voice through the door, which told her more than the words would have because she could not hear the words. Lucia put one hand on Elena's knee and kept it there, which was enough. The call lasted 11 minutes. When Vincent came out, his face was the controlled, contained face she recognized from his worst moments, which meant the information was bad, but manageable. "Pruitt has been retained by a man named Sorrento," he said. "He runs the syndicate that your father borrowed from. The debt is significant. Sorrento believes you have information about accounts your father moved before he disappeared." "I don't," Elena said. "I know you don't. Pruitt now also knows you don't." He paused. "What your father told Sorrento was that you helped him move the money. That you were part of it." The words landed like something physical. "I was 19, Elena said. Her voice was very steady and very cold. "I was a music student at NYU who went home for Thanksgiving and found her father gone and her family destroyed." "Yes," Vincent said. "That is what the facts show, which is why this is manageable." He looked at her carefully. "Sorrento is a businessman. He is not interested in punishing innocents. He is interested in recovering what he lost. If we can demonstrate clearly that you have nothing he needs, he has no reason to pursue you." "And my father?" Vincent held her eyes. "Your father is a separate conversation." She understood what that meant. She did not ask him to clarify. By 5 o'clock that afternoon, the day had taken another turn. Elena's phone had been ringing since noon with numbers she did not recognize, which she did not answer. And by the time she checked the internet, she understood why. The video from the restaurant, the one that had circulated that morning, had been picked up by a news station that had done what news stations did, which was fill in the gaps between facts with the most dramatic available narrative. The headline read, "Moretti Family Waitress, Love Interest, or Inside Operator." She read it, standing in the hallway of Vincent's house with her phone in both hands, and felt the world rearrange itself around the particular specific wrongness of seeing your life described by strangers in terms designed to generate engagement rather than truth. The story had her as a plant. A woman deliberately positioned inside Bella Vita to manage access to the Moretti family. It cited unnamed sources. It included a photograph of Elena taken outside the restaurant. It mentioned carefully and with the legal precision of something that knew exactly how close to the edge it was walking that questions existed about her real identity. Carla called at 5:30. Elena answered because Carla's number she recognized. "The owner called me. Carla said. She did not lead up to it. He wants you out, effective immediately. He's transferring your last check. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them. Okay. Elena. It's okay, Carla. I expected it. It's not right, Carla said, and her voice had lost its professional composure in a way Elena had never heard before. You stood up for someone who deserved to be stood up for, and now they're— It's okay, Elena said again gently. Really, thank you, for everything. The silence on the line was brief and heavy, with things not said. You be safe, Carla said finally. I will. She hung up and sat with the phone in her lap and stared at the floor. Lucia found her there. She sat down beside her without asking and waited. Elena signed, I lost my job. Lucia signed back, I know. Vincent saw the article. The whole city thinks I'm something I'm not. The whole city, Lucia signed, thinks many things that are not true. That is not new information about the city. Elena almost laughed. Not quite. I brought this here, Elena said. I brought my mess into your home, and now it is on the news, and your son is managing a situation that has nothing to do with him, and your family's name is attached to something that could have been avoided if you had just stayed invisible, Lucia signed. If you had just stayed afraid. If you had just walked past me that first evening instead of kneeling down to speak to me. She paused. She looked at Elena with the directness she always used when she wanted to make sure she was understood. I am very glad you did not. Lucia, I am 80% deaf and 100% certain. Lucia signed, and Elena did laugh. Then truly, the way laughter comes when you least expect it and most need it. She laughed until her eyes were wet, and she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth, and Lucia watched her with the expression of someone who has accomplished exactly what they set out to accomplish. That evening, Vincent's team confirmed that Anthony Caruso had checked out of his hotel. He was gone. No forward address, no communication. He had been informed through channels Elena did not ask about that his arrangement with Pruitt was dissolved, and he had apparently made the calculation that Chicago was no longer a city worth remaining in. This was the version of her father she had always known was real, and had spent years hoping was not. A man who cut losses. A man for whom people were entries in a ledger, and not the other thing, not the thing they were supposed to be. Elena received this news sitting at the dinner table with Vincent and Lucia, and she received it with the silence of someone absorbing something they already knew but were hoping not to have confirmed. He's not coming back, Vincent said. Not a question. No, Elena said. He's not. She looked at her plate. That should feel worse than it does. Maybe you grieved him before tonight, Vincent said. Maybe you have been grieving him for years. She looked up. He was watching her with the particular attention she had come to recognize as his version of care, thorough patient, unwilling to look away. Yes, she said quietly. I think I have. Lucia signed across the table. Grief that is finished does not have to be carried anymore. Elena looked at this woman, at this family, at this table where 3 people had, over the course of a few weeks and a great many unexpected conversations, built something she did not have a word for and was afraid to name because naming things made them real, and real things could be lost. She thought about what Vincent had said that morning. You're not running. That was the agreement. That. She thought about what Pruitt still knew, what Sorrento still believed, what the news article had put into the world. She thought about the news cycle, and how quickly it moved, and how quickly people forgot, and how Vincent's team had managed things today with a speed and efficiency that was impressive, and also she realized a thing that attracted its own kind of attention. She thought about what it would mean to stay. She thought about what it would mean to go. After dinner, she helped Lucia with the dishes, while Vincent took a call in the other room. They worked side by side without signing, just the comfortable physical language of 2 people sharing a task. And Lucia handed her plates, and Elena dried them and stacked them. And the ordinary rhythm of it was something Elena had not had in 4 years, and felt in its ordinariness like the most extravagant luxury she could imagine. "Do you trust him?" Lucia signed when the dishes were done. Elena did not ask who she meant. "Yes," Elena signed. "That is what frightens me." "Why does trust frighten you?" "Because trust means I have something to lose again," Elena said. "I spent 4 years making sure I had nothing to lose. It was terrible, but it was safe." Lucia dried her hands on the kitchen towel and looked at her. Then she signed with great deliberateness, "Safe and alive are not the same thing." Elena stood there with a dish in her hand and felt those words move through her, the way true things move, not in a straight line, but in circles, settling into the places they belong. "No," she signed back. "They're not." She set the dish on the counter. She looked at the doorway where she could hear Vincent's voice, low and steady, managing something in the other room. She looked at Lucia's face, which held the patience of someone who has already decided how this story ends and is simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. She thought, "I am so tired of running." She thought, "I am so tired of being afraid." She thought, "I don't want to do this alone anymore." And then she thought something she had not been prepared for. Something that arrived not as a decision, but as a recognition, the way you recognize a face you have not seen in years, sudden and certain and completely without warning. "I don't want to leave this." She stood there in that kitchen with the realization settling into her bones, and she felt beneath the fear and the noise and the complication and everything still unresolved. Something she had almost completely forgotten the texture of. She felt like herself. Not the careful, constructed, deliberately invisible self she had maintained for 4 years. The other one. The one that had existed before all of it. The one that had played piano in small recital halls, and laughed too loudly, and signed conversations with her brother in the back of the car, and believed somewhere in the irrational and necessary way that young people believe things, that the world was large enough to hold what she wanted to do with her life. That self had been in storage for a very long time. She had not realized until this moment that it was still there. She did not realize until she heard the front door open and close, and felt the particular shift in the house that meant Vincent had ended his call and was moving toward the kitchen, that she had already made her decision. She was staying. She did not say it out loud yet, but it was made. And in the other room, where she had been sitting quietly for the past 10 minutes with her phone in her hand, Lucia sent a single text message to a contact she had not used in several months. A woman in Boston. A woman who ran a small community center for the deaf and had been asking Lucia for over a year if she knew anyone who had genuine sign language skills and a heart for the work. Lucia typed, "I think I found your girl. Give her time." She pressed send. She set down the phone. She folded her hands in her lap and waited for the kitchen sounds that told her the people she loved were in the same room again, and she permitted herself quietly and without announcement to be deeply, privately, and completely glad. She slept through the night for the first time in 4 years. She did not realize that was what had happened until she woke up and looked at the clock and saw 8:47 and understood that her body, which had maintained a vigilant and exhausting relationship with sleep for so long, she had forgotten what genuine rest felt like, had finally let go. She lay there for a full minute, not moving, just feeling the specific texture of a morning that had arrived without dread and thought. So this is what it feels like. She was in the guest room of Vincent's house because Lucia had refused with great firmness and zero negotiation to let her go home the previous night. Elena had not argued hard. She had not argued at all. She came downstairs to find Lucia at the kitchen table with coffee and a newspaper she was not reading, and Vincent standing at the counter with his phone, and the kind of charged quiet that meant something had happened before she woke up. "What?" Elena said. Vincent looked up. "Sorrento called this morning." She stopped moving. And it's done." He set the phone on the counter. "He received the documentation my team put together last night. Your financial records from the 4 years before you left New York, your school transcripts, your mother's statements, everything that establishes cleanly that you had no involvement in what your father did." He paused. "He's a businessman. He confirmed what I expected. You are not his problem. Elena put both hands flat on the back of the nearest chair. Just like that. There is nothing just like that about it, Vincent said. It took 14 hours, 4 conversations, and 2 lawyers, but yes, it is done. She stood there and absorbed this. 4 years. 4 years of train routes changed, and names kept, and connections severed. 4 years of waking at 3 in the morning to the particular panic of someone who has been running so long, the running has become the whole of their identity. And now, it was done. Done the way things are done when someone with Vincent Moretti's reach decides something needs to be finished. She should feel relief. She did feel relief. But under the relief was something more complicated, the specific disorientation of a person who has organized their entire life around a threat and must now figure out what they are when the threat is gone. Lucia was watching her face with the attention she always brought to faces. She signed, "You don't know what to do now." Elena looked at her. "Not exactly, no." "That's all right," Lucia signed. "You have time to find out. That is the point." Elena sat down at the table. She put her hands around the coffee cup. Lucia pushed toward her and felt the warmth of it and said, "I need to call my mother." The kitchen went very still. She had not said those words out loud, she realized, in 4 years. She had thought them, many times. Late at night, in the specific loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from choosing to stay away from people you love, because proximity puts them in danger. She had thought about her mother and put the thought away the way you put sharp things away carefully so they do not cut you every time you reach past them. She said, "She doesn't know I'm in Chicago. She doesn't know I'm safe. She doesn't know any of it." Vincent said quietly from across the kitchen, "I know." She looked at him. "The people watching her building? She's safe. She has been safe for 2 days now." He picked up his coffee. "She's been safe, and she doesn't know why, which is probably confusing and frightening." Elena stood up. "I need to call her." She took her coffee and her phone to the front room and sat on the couch and held the phone for a long moment before she dialed the number she had not dialed in 4 years. She knew it still. That was the thing about phone numbers belonging to people you love. You stop calling them, and you never stop knowing them. It rang twice. "Hello," her mother's voice, older. Careful the way people become careful when they have learned that unexpected calls carry weight. Elena closed her eyes. She said, "Mama, it's me." The silence that followed was brief and enormous. Then her mother said in a voice that was trying to hold itself together and not succeeding, "Elena." "Yes," Elena said. "I'm here. I'm in Chicago. I'm safe." She pressed her free hand against her knee to stop it from shaking. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry it has been this long. I need you to know. You're safe." Her mother's voice cut through. "You are safe right now?" "Yes, I promise." Another silence. And then her mother made a sound that was not words, just a sound, the kind of sound that a person makes when something they have been holding for a very long time is finally set down. It was the most painful and the most beautiful sound Elena had heard in years. She sat there and listened to it and did not try to stop her own tears this time. They talked for an hour. An hour of all the things that 4 years of silence accumulates. The small things and the enormous things mixed together the way they always are in real conversations. Her mother's job. Her mother's neighbor, who had a dog named Frank, who barked every morning at precisely 6:15. The fact that her mother had kept Elena's piano in the living room had never moved. It had never stopped believing that it would be played again. At the end of the call, her mother said, "Come home." Elena looked at the wall of the front room. She thought about the kitchen behind her where Lucia and Vincent were waiting with the patience of people who understood that some things take the time they take. She thought about the text Lucia had sent to someone in Boston, which she had not been told about yet but would be in time. "Soon," Elena said. "I promise. Soon." She hung up and sat there for a moment, just being a person who had just talked to her mother for the first time in 4 years. Then she went back to the kitchen and poured more coffee and sat at the table and looked at Vincent and Lucia and said, "She kept my piano." Lucia signed immediately. Of course she did. Vincent said nothing. He just watched her with the expression she had come to recognize as his version of warmth, steady and real and without performance. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Elena's life, not because they were dramatic, but because they were not. The news cycle moved on from the story of the waitress at Bella Vita with the speed that news cycles always move on, which was fast and without ceremony. Within 10 days, 3 other stories had pushed it below the fold. Within 3 weeks, it existed only in the internet's archive of yesterday's noise. The restaurant fired her, and then the restaurant owner, under a pressure she did not ask about, and Vincent did not explain, sent a very formal written apology and 3 months of severance, which she accepted without comment. Carla called to say goodbye, and then called again a week later just to check in, which was how Elena discovered that Carla was not actually the cold professional she presented as, but was, in fact, a woman with a very large capacity for loyalty that she expressed through competence rather than warmth, because she had decided years ago that warmth was too expensive to give carelessly. Elena told her, "You should give it more freely." Carla said, "That advice sounds like something a person says when they have recently done exactly that and discovered it did not destroy them." Elena smiled. "Maybe." The call from Boston came through Lucia, who presented it to Elena one evening with the specific casualness of someone who has been planning this moment for some time and does not want that to be visible. A woman named Dr. Patricia Wells ran a community center for the deaf on the north side of Boston and needed someone with genuine sign language skills and a background that could bridge both hearing and deaf communities. She had a program for children. She had funding that was not enough and a need that was not small. She needed someone who could teach, coordinate, and care. Elena listened to all of this and then looked at Lucia and said, "You did this." Lucia signed back with absolute serenity. "I made a phone call." "When?" "The evening of the dishes." Lucia signed. "When you were deciding whether to stay." "I had already decided to stay." "I know," Lucia signed. "But staying does not mean standing still." Elena looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Boston is far." Lucia signed, "Boston is a train ride, and I have always wanted to see Boston in the spring." That made Elena laugh, a full, real laugh that had no caution in it. She called Patricia Wells the next morning. They talked for 2 hours. By the end of the call, something had been decided that felt less like a job offer and more like a recognition the way certain moments feel, not like choices, but like arrivals. She told Vincent that evening. She was prepared for complicated. She was prepared for him to push back, or to be quiet in the way that meant something was being withheld. He said, "Good." She looked at him. "Good? It's what you should be doing." He said it simply without any of the weight she expected. "You have something real to give. You know what it means to be unheard. That is not a qualification most people can claim." "It's Boston," she said. "I'd be leaving Chicago." "You'd be doing work that matters," he said. "Leaving Chicago is not the same thing as leaving." He met her eyes. "Unless you want it to be." The air between them had the quality it always had in the moments that cost something. She held it. "No," she said. "I don't want it to be." "Then it isn't," he said. And that was the whole of it. Simple, real. The way things are when two people have stopped pretending they do not mean what they mean. She moved to Boston in March. Patricia Wells turned out to be exactly the kind of person Elena had hoped she would be. Direct and funny, and deeply serious about the work and the particular way of people who have decided something matters and are not interested in reconsidering that decision. The community center was real and imperfect and full of exactly the kind of noise that productive places generate. Elena taught signing classes 3 mornings a week. She ran the children's program 4 afternoons. She learned quickly that children acquiring sign language have a specific joy about it that is unlike any other kind of learning. The particular delight of discovering that your hands can say exactly what your voice is not equipped to say. And watching that discovery happen repeatedly in the faces of small people was something she had not anticipated and could not get enough of. She called her mother every Sunday. On the fourth Sunday, she flew home to New York and stayed for a long weekend and sat at the piano in the living room for the first time in 6 years. She did not play anything complicated. She played scales. And then she played a few notes of something she had been practicing in her head for years without being able to admit she was doing it. And her mother sat in the armchair across the room and wept without trying not to. And Elena let her because some things deserve to be wept over without management. Vincent came to Boston twice in those first 3 months. Both times he called before he came, which she appreciated. Both times they walked and talked with the ease of people who have already established the important things and are now simply building on them, filling in the corners and the details, discovering the smaller truths about each other that are made of ordinary time rather than crisis. He told her on the second visit, walking back from a coffee place she had found near the center, that he had been thinking about the foundation. She stopped walking. What foundation? He looked at her with the expression that meant he had been holding something for a while and had decided now was the moment. My mother's foundation. She has been talking about it for 2 years. A charity for deaf children. Educational resources, sign language programs, outreach to communities that don't have access to services. He paused. She wants you to run it. Elena looked at him. She has the funding, he said. She has the structure in place. She has been waiting for the right person, which is apparently a thing she decided she found approximately 3 months ago. She told you to tell me this? Elena said. She told me to tell you this when the timing felt right, Vincent said. She was very specific about the timing feels right part. Elena stood on a Boston sidewalk in late spring with the sun doing something specific and warm, and thought about Lucia Moretti sitting in a restaurant in Chicago signing, "Good evening, ma'am. Would you like another tea?" back to a waitress everyone had forgotten to look at. She thought about what it meant that a woman she had met by kneeling down beside a dropped napkin had in the course of 5 months rearranged the entire architecture of her life. Yes, she said. Vincent raised his eyebrows slightly. That's it, just yes. Yes, Elena said. I'm not going to perform uncertainty. I don't feel just to seem appropriately thoughtful about it. Yes. Tell her yes. Something in his face opened with a warmth she had seen before, but which still each time caught her slightly off guard. She's going to be insufferable about this, he said. She has earned insufferable, Elena said. He laughed. A real laugh, full and unguarded, the kind she had been collecting privately since the first time she heard it, because it was the sound of a man who spent most of his life in control, discovering that he did not always have to be. The Lucia Moretti Foundation launched 8 months later in Chicago in the ballroom of a hotel on Michigan Avenue that Lucia had selected with the attention she brought to all matters she considered important, which was all matters. Elena flew back for the launch and for the weeks of preparation before it, and found herself standing in rooms full of people whose faces she read the way she had always read faces, watching for what language did not say, managing the particular chaos of an event that was trying to be both elegant and genuinely practically useful. The gala was not the kind of charity event that existed to feel good about itself. It had programs, it had commitments, it had school districts and medical providers and community organizations signed to actual partnerships, and every table in that ballroom had at least one representative of a deaf community who was not there as a guest to be celebrated, but as a partner to be accountable to. That had been Elena's one non-negotiable when she took the role. Lucia had agreed without hesitation. Vincent had funded it without putting his name on any of it, which Elena only found out 6 weeks before the event, and which told her something about him she did not need to be told because she already knew it. Patricia Wells flew in from Boston and sat at table 4 and watched Elena work the room and told Vincent, who was standing near the back, with the contained pleasure of someone watching something they helped build operate the way it should. She was always going to end up here. She just needed to get here by the right road. Vincent said, she needed to get here by her own road. Patricia looked at him. Same thing, she said. For people like her. He did not disagree. Elena gave a short speech. She did not like giving speeches. She was precise about this. She gave the speech anyway because some things need to be said out loud by the person who knows why they matter. She talked about communication. She talked about the specific courage it takes to stay present in a world that is not built for you. She talked about a woman who had sat in a restaurant and waited for someone to simply speak to her, and what it had cost that woman to keep showing up, and what it had meant when someone finally did. She did not say Lucia's name. She did not need to. Lucia was sitting at the front table with the expression of someone who is publicly not crying, and is doing an unconvincing job of it. After the speech, during the part of the evening that involved people moving around and talking, and the particular organized warmth of a well-run event, Elena was standing near the entrance when the door opened and a small girl came in. She was maybe 8 years old. She was wearing a dress that had been chosen carefully for the occasion by someone who loved her pale yellow, slightly formal. She walked into the crowded ballroom and stopped, and Elena recognized the stop immediately, because she had felt it herself, the specific hesitation of someone who cannot hear the ambient sound that tells you where you are and what kind of place this is and whether you belong here. The girl looked at the room. People moved around her, not unkindly, but not noticing. Conversations continued. Someone passed too close, and she took a small step back. Elena was moving before she had decided to move. She crossed the room and came to a stop in front of the girl and lowered herself to eye level and waited until the girl looked at her. When she did, Elena raised her hands. She signed slowly and clearly in the sign that children learn first and understand best. "Good evening. You're safe here." The girl stared at her hands, then at her face, then at her hands again, and then with the unguarded speed of a child who has just understood something enormous, she signed back. A single sign. The sign for thank you made slightly wrong in the way children make things slightly wrong when they are still learning, and it is perfect. Elena smiled at her. She felt from across the room 2 separate presences. Lucia, watching with both hands pressed flat against her sternum the way she held things she did not want to lose. And Vincent standing near the back, completely still watching Elena, the way he had watched her from the moment she first raised her hands at table 7 in a restaurant in Chicago and changed everything. Like she was the only thing in the world that existed. Like he had been looking for this for a very long time and had found it where he least expected and was not going to look away. Elena stood and took the girl's hand and walked her to the table where her family was waiting and handed her back and went on with the evening. Later that night, after the guest had gone and the room was being put back to its ordinary self, Elena sat at a table with Lucia and Vincent and the specific, comfortable exhaustion of people who have finished something they are proud of. Lucia signed things intermittently. Vincent drank coffee. Elena did not say much. She did not need to. This was the thing she had not known to miss. Not safety exactly. Not even connection exactly. This, the feeling of being in a room with people who knew who you were, all of it, the real name, and the hard years, and the grief that had made her, and the strength she had built from that grief, and who were simply completely, unremarkably glad that she was there. She thought about the girl in the pale yellow dress. She thought about what it meant to walk into a room where you cannot hear the sounds that tell you it is safe, and to find, instead of being walked past, someone who stops, someone who comes to your level, someone who says in the language your body already knows you belong here. She thought about Marco, about the private sign he made for her name at the heart, the one that meant sister and meant the person I trust most in the world. She made it once quietly under the table where no one could see it. Then she put her hand back on the table and looked at Lucia and smiled. "Next year," Lucia signed. "We do this in 2 cities." Elena looked at her. "You planned this before tonight was over." "I planned this before tonight began," Lucia signed. "I was simply waiting for the right moment to say it." Vincent said to Elena across the table, "She has been like this my entire life." Elena looked at him. She looked at Lucia. She looked at the room around them being folded back into itself, the tablecloths lifted, and the glasses collected, all the evidence of a night that had mattered being carried out the door. She said 2 cities, and she meant yes. She meant yes to all of it. Yes to the work and the foundation, and the children who would come through doors they were afraid of and find someone waiting for them with their hands open. Yes to Sunday calls with her mother, and yes to Boston in the mornings, and yes to Chicago, and the kitchen table, and the dishes, and the coffee, and the particular warmth of a family that had chosen her with the same deliberate, clear-eyed intention she had finally chosen back. Yes to being seen. Yes to being known. Yes, after 4 years and one dropped napkin, and one kneeling down in a crowded restaurant to speak to a woman nobody else had thought to speak to. Yes to being alive inside her own life again. Elena Caruso had spent 4 years learning how to disappear. What she discovered on the other side of all of it was that the bravest thing she ever did was decide to be found. You said viết lại phần hook mở đầu của kịch bản này cực mạnh. Viết lại phần hook mở đầu của kịch bản này cực mạnh. Mở đầu bằng một hành động, hook cực mạnh bộc lộ ngay hành động cảm xúc đỉnh, ngay lập tức tiết lộ xung đột với tiêu đề không dẫn dắt không giới thiệu. Dài 90 đến 110 từ 1440. Claude responded, "Don't you dare look away from her. Orchestrated dramatic opening hook, voi đối thoại mạnh mẽ. Orchestrated dramatic opening hook, voi đối thoại mạnh mẽ. Don't you dare look away from her." Elena's voice cut through the entire restaurant like a blade. Her hands were already moving, signing fast and fierce to the elderly deaf woman trembling at table 7, and every fork in Bella Vita froze mid-air. Because the man Elena had just publicly defied was a city councilman. And the woman she was defending was Lucia Moretti. And the man now rising slowly from his chair with the terrifying calm of someone who has never needed to raise his voice to fill a room was Vincent Moretti, Chicago's most feared name. Staring at a waitress nobody had ever noticed before like she was the only person alive. You said viết lại fan hook mở đầu của kịch bản này cực mạnh.